Video is an unedited walkthrough of post-processing a nighttime cityscape. I'll touch on the challenges of creating images like this, composition, and obviously post-processing techniques to bring out the full potential of your nighttime cityscape images. I'm John Barbio, and this is photolisticlife.com. We're going to start with the challenges of this photograph. This photograph was taken in New York City. In the center here, that is the World Trade Center. I was in a hotel, and one of the biggest challenges when you're shooting from a hotel, if you don't have a window that can open all the way, all the way up, you're going to have reflections from the city lights. You're going to have reflections from the lights inside of your hotel room, and so you want to try and eliminate those, obviously, as much as you can. So one of the things I did is I actually shot with a little bit narrow, middle of the road aperture here, f8. Normally, if you're shooting through a dirty window, which this one, I mean, you can kind of see here, and really all around the center here, it's a little bit faded there, and that's really just garbage on the window. And so, shooting at f8 got rid of a lot of the stuff on the outside here, and it wasn't too bad because it was nighttime and there was not any direct light, shining in through that window. Had there been, you'd have seen everything. So I went with f8 instead of 13, 16, something like that. So that I could sort of meet it halfway in the middle. Normally, at f2, like I said, it would have gotten rid of everything that you saw there and you just have the city, but my foreground would not have been as sharp, and really, depending on where I focus, the background may not have been either. Another challenge that you're going to have with nighttime cityscape photography is exposing for your highlights, and also getting shadow detail. I'm shooting in RAW with this. I'm using a Nikon DF and a 50 millimeter prime lens. You can see my settings up here: ISO 100, 50 millimeters, and 30 seconds. This is one of 3 frames. We're going to look at all 3 of those frames. We're actually going to work with all 3 of those frames in Photoshop and then bring it back into Lightroom to finish the processing. But I shot at ISO 100. If you're, a veteran photographer, ISO 100 is going to give you a lot of leeway as far as bringing the shadow detail out without coming up with a lot of noise. If I would have shot at a higher ISO, I wouldn't have had as long of an exposure, meaning less light trails. Also, if I tried to expose for those shadows, you'd have seen a lot of grain inside of those shadows, which is not what I wanted. I wanted this to be as clear and as sharp as possible, and you'll see that in Photoshop when we start working with it. Another challenge with nighttime cityscape photography, depending on what you're trying to do, is obviously composition. And I mean, every photographer will have challenges with composition. Obviously, you want to have the best composition possible. The photograph that you're looking at right here is not my favorite. It's not the best composition. Actually, landscape mode or landscape orientation would have been much better. But this is what I have from that trip, and this is what I'm working with right now. So this is what we're going to work with. We're going to turn this photo into, whoops, we're going to turn this photo into this photo. So you can see it's quite different. A lot more light trails. We're actually working with, like I said, 3 photographs, and I'm going to walk you through how to do this. So let's go ahead and head back to this photo. I'm going to scroll down here, and the first thing I'm going to do is, well, first let me show you. So this is the first photo, a lot of light trails there. This is the second photo, different light trails, and that's the very first photo I took. And again, different light trails. And the idea is I want to have more light trails. Had I done a longer exposure, so instead of doing 25 or 30 seconds, had I done it for a minute, or 2 minutes or 3 minutes using a neutral density filter, which would have allowed me to do that and still maintain my highlights, the light trails would have been uncontrollable, and really it would have just turned into a big white blob. And you'll actually see, if I zoom in over here, you'll see there's some white blobs already there. If I go through, you'll see different areas, and when we're in Photoshop, I'll show you how to get rid of some of those areas and really just try to get the best exposure possible and have the nicest light trails where you want them and how you want them. So we're going to go ahead down here. We're going to hold Shift and select these 3 files right here. I'm going to right click that. I'm going to go to Edit In, and I'm going to open that as layers in Photoshop. And when it pulls up Photoshop, you may see I was working on it a little bit earlier. But as that's pulling in, one of the other challenges in any type of cityscape photography, or really city photography, is going to be the different sources of light that you have to deal with. You'll notice that, right now this looks sort of flat, sort of yellowish, and you'll see in here, I mean, there's lights coming from everywhere. You got blue lights, red lights, you have LED lights, you've got lights inside of buildings, and they're all different sorts of bulbs. You've got red lights up here. And so as we're processing this, we're going to focus on, back in Lightroom, how to adjust for that, and I'll show you that. But now all three of these are in here. The first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and select all three of those. I'm going to go up here to Edit. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to Auto Align Layers. And it does just what it says. It's lining all three of those layers up so they're perfect. So if there's any movement of the camera on the tripod and I were to lay these over top of each other and maybe use some sort of a mask, a layer mask, to reveal a layer beneath another layer, they may not line up perfectly and it'll look fuzzy or out of focus because of that. And so by doing the auto align, it eliminates the chance of that happening, because you'll see here we will use a layer mask possibly. So all three of those are lined up now, which is great. Next step I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and I want to figure out first. Let's go ahead and turn those eyes off. If you remember when we were over in Lightroom, I showed you there were some areas that were blown out. So we're going to zoom in here and we're going to see which layer that was, because that layer is going to get a layer mask. So this one looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and click on, turn that off. We're going to click on this one. Okay, so right here, we want to get rid of that. So that one's getting a layer mask. And then if you go to the top one, same deal. We got a little bit of a blowout right there, so we're going to probably get rid of that. But I'm going to go ahead and turn these back on. This here, I'm going to put a layer mask on there. And then I'm going to go ahead and get a brush. And now we need to reveal that again. So on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Oops, I'm going to change this to black. So whatever I paint black is going to erase that portion of the photograph that has a layer mask. So I'm going to reduce that or get rid of it altogether. Turn that off. I'm going to go here. We're good. Apologize if I already did that. So I got some blowout here. I want to put another layer mask there. And I want to eliminate, we'll go with just that spot right there. All right, so when I turn these all back on again, you'll see you can hardly tell that, that I had done that. I'm going to go ahead here, normal. I'm going to turn this to lighten. And I'm going to do the same one for this. Okay, so that brought in a lot more of those. And now you'll see, I mean, it's still pretty bright there, but when I bring it back over to Lightroom, we'll reduce those highlights a little bit more. Probably not going to be perfect, and that's okay for this image. So let's get this back to the right size. So that looks pretty good, at 53%. I think I was in like 300%. So if I go ahead and zoom in now and just take you to 100%, still looks pretty good. So we're going to zoom out. Next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of some of these distractions. Now, because I was shooting through a hotel window, the lights did reflect a little bit. And if you look, I'm going to zoom in again. If you look here next to the two buildings at the end, you'll see sort of a repeating pattern from these bright lights next to it. So I'm going to show you a quick way to get rid of that. And I mean, there's a couple of different ways. I mean, you could certainly go in there and just wipe it out with another mask, or same thing with these. Like this light here was in one frame, this was in another, and then the third frame didn't have any of these lights. And so I could do the same thing. I could do a layer mask and get rid of it. But there's a lot easier way. If you come up here and you go to the healing brush, I go ahead and click that. And before I do that, let me flatten this. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a second layer. So whatever I do with this healing brush is going to be on this copy here. And then if I don't like it, if I mess something up, I can just delete that and do it again. But I'm going to go ahead and press Option. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to wipe this out as much as I can. Takes a little bit. I may not go through. Whoops. We're going to go ahead and edit, undo, my bad. So it takes a little bit. I may not do all of it with you just because I don't want you to sit here all night and watch this. But you get the idea. I do have a little bit of obsessive compulsive disorder, so I will do a lot. One thing, when we get over to the buildings, I'll just do a little bit and then we'll move on. Um, so if you have a lot of time, you can go through, get rid of the green lights there. You'll see here, same deal. You just come down it. Pretty easy to get rid of this stuff. I would go through all of this and get rid of all of that just because it would drive me crazy if it was, still there. But I'm gonna move on. So that's done. I like that. I'm gonna go ahead and merge that layer because I don't need two of those. I'm gonna make another one here. Okay, so the reason why I made this other background copy is if I zoom back out again, one of the things that drives me nuts is you're going to see these buildings are straight, looking great. This building looks tilted. This building looks tilted. So we're going to try and fix this. Now, because I've done this before I did this video, so you can see kind of the, before and after, I know what I need to do. So there's a couple of ways you can do this, but I'm going to go through both of them just so you'll know what they are. You go over to Filter and Adaptive Wide Angle. When you get in here, you can draw a line along the building that you want to straighten. So, first and foremost, let's go ahead and do this one on the bottom. So I'm going to draw a line here. I know that's supposed to be straight. That's going to sort of pull that one in a little bit. I'm going to flatten this one across here because that's supposed to be straight. And don't worry, I know it's adjusting this over here. And you can certainly, you can go back in and say, okay, well, that's messed up, so let's straighten that back out again, and it'll do it. Okay, so not much different. You'll see we have slight bowing right here. That's okay. I'm going to hit OK because that did a lot of the big work or the heavy work. And then I'm going to go ahead and once that's done, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Warp. All right, so this gives you some really powerful, or gives you a really powerful way of adjusting this. So see where it's warped right here? I can simply grab it and just move it in a little bit. That straightened it right up. If I'm still not happy with that, down here I'm definitely not happy, so I'm going to bring that across and sort of straighten this up a little bit over here. And it can be difficult once you're in here. I mean, that looks pretty good to me, so I'm not going to get too crazy with this. And I could really go up here too. Just slightly straighten that. So we're going to go with that. And again, I mean, you could spend hours doing this. I mean, really, I'm not super happy with this, but you get the idea. You can get this as straight as you want to. Now that we've got that all straightened out, the next step is going to be, I'm going to just do a quick sharpen here. So let's go ahead and flatten this. Filter, sharpen. I'm going to go down to unsharp mask. That looks good, and leave that there. You can adjust those settings. A quick Google search of best settings for unsharpen match will give you 6 different recommendations. I really don't have one. I just try different things, and hopefully if I like it, I'll keep it. If not, I'll adjust it. So, but that's not what this video is about. Anyways, so that's as far as I'll go in Photoshop with this. Like I said, I would play around trying to get these buildings as straight as possible. I would get rid of some of these elements over here, this light over here, but these are all things that you can do on your own. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Layer. Looks like we're already flat, so I'm just going to go File, Save. That's going to put it right back into Lightroom. So here we are in Lightroom, same image. This is where it gets fun. So first thing I like to do is I want to get my temperature down a little bit, just because when I took this photo it was not as yellow, so I want to get it back to close to where it was. So we're gonna go with something like this for now. Exposure for now looks pretty good. Highlights, maybe bring those down a little bit more. Shadows, I'm going to open those all the way up, and that gives me more of my detail in here. Clarity, I'm going to pump that up a bit. Again, more detail. Vibrance, I'm going to bring that up. Saturation, I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Blacks look pretty good. Whites, I'm going to go ahead and slide that over. Let's see here. Go with something like 37. And slide to taste. whatever looks good to you. So that looks good. If you feel like the windows are too yellow or you've got too much of a certain color in there, you can come down here to the HSL and you can adjust these. So like if I thought, I don't want to have all this yellow in here, I could just put yellow all the way over to the left. It gets rid of a lot of that. I really don't mind having that yellow in there. I like having the various colors. I think it makes it pop a little bit more. One thing I'd like to see though is up here. I think I'd like it to be a little more blue. So I'm going to go ahead and take a neutral density filter. I'm going to drag it across like this. I'm going to go ahead and drop that exposure just a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit cooler. So we got our blues going on. Close that up. So far, so good. I'm going to go ahead and take a radial filter. I'm going to put it up here in the top, something like this. I'm going to increase that exposure a bit. I think I'll go with that. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that as well. I'm giving the photo a little bit more depth, and I'm doing it with light. You hear people talk a lot about depth. Now, the light trails going through the photo with the World Trade Center in the background, that definitely gives it some depth. But this kind of gives it more of a three-dimensional feel by altering the light a little bit inside here. So I'm going to go with something like that. I'm going to duplicate this one more time and really just play with it, see what looks good. I'm going to go ahead and put this one right here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I do want to get rid of this thing because it's driving me nuts. All right, so it doesn't look super sharp. It's because I'm at 200%. Zoom back out here. So that looks pretty good. You can stop right here. You can get more creative. You can certainly take another neutral density. If you think this is too yellow down here, just drag it up. Drop your exposure a bit. And then cool it off a bit. Whoa, too much. Something like that. You can play with it as much as you want. I don't like that. I'm going to take that off. But you can certainly play with it. Other than that, that's a really quick and simple adjustment. The only other thing I can think of is, again, you could straighten the buildings up a little bit more. I would definitely recommend going in and getting rid of the marks back here if you're going to use this photo for anything or blow this photo up. You can play around with the sharpening. Now I had 3 different layers in there, or 3 different images. One of them is definitely sharper than the other, and it looks like on this one, it actually looks pretty good. Let's see if we can, yeah, so you can adjust the sharpening even a little more through here. When I do that, I like to increase my masking. If you press and hold Option while you slide this over, everything you see that's black is not going to get sharpened. If you look here, if I'm over too far on the left, there's a lot of crap in the sky that is getting sharpened. I don't want that, so I'm going to slide it over until that's gone. Something like that. It's a pretty sharp photo. Again, that was at 200% and it looked pretty good. But that's it. It's really simple. I could talk all day about composition and how to adjust for those light trails so they're not blown out. I hope you like it. Leave a comment in the bottom of either YouTube or over on photolisticlife.com. If you haven't visited photolisticlife.com, this is photolisticlife.com. If you go down about 3/4 of the way, you'll see an area where you can add your email address and hit subscribe. That'll give you an update each time I do a new post. The last one I did was my landscape photography post-processing workflow. And I think, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's pretty good. So if you get a chance, check that out. But lots of stuff on here, a lot of street photography, some camera reviews, different things like that. If you get a chance, check it out and follow me. Hope you like it. Have a great night.